Here is an unseen thread that binds souls across time, an unspoken language that echoes through the silences we leave behind. In the delicate rhythm of departure and return, there lies a truth often overlooked. Love, in all its complexity, is never truly lost. Women, like the tides drawn by the moon, often find their way back, not out of longing alone, but because the universe itself conspires for the unfinished to find completion. Perhaps it is not the person they return to, but the parts of themselves left behind in another's presence. Every journey away is merely a pause in the symphony of connection, and every return a crescendo in the eternal dance of becoming. Tonight, let us unravel the psychological secret not as a formula, but as a mirror to our own depths. For in the ebb and flow of hearts, we find that every reunion whispers one timeless truth. Nothing that is truly meant for you ever stays away. There's a certain ache that lingers in the spaces between two souls, a quiet echo of what was left unsaid and undone. When a woman leaves, it's easy to assume that the story has ended, that the final page has been turned. But life, much like love, is rarely that simple. There is an invisible thread that binds us to those who have touched our hearts, a thread woven from memories, laughter, and even pain. And no matter how far one drifts, that thread remains, whispering in the stillness, urging us to return. Women come back not because they cannot move forward, but because within the silence of separation, they often hear the loudest truths. It's in the absence where clarity blooms. Sometimes it's to find closure. Other times it's to rediscover a part of themselves that was left behind in the presence of someone they once loved. You see, we are all made up of the people we've loved, the places we've been, and the moments that have shaped us. When a woman returns, it is often because her soul seeks to gather the pieces she left behind, to understand them, and perhaps to finally release them. But let's not mistake this return as a sign of weakness or indecision. It is in fact a testament to the depth of human connection. In every goodbye, there is often an unspoken what if. And sometimes coming back is not about rekindling love, but about honoring the journey. Acknowledging that the bond meant something, even if it couldn't last forever. Because isn't that the beauty of life? That even in endings, there are echoes of new beginnings. And sometimes the heart must return to the past, not to stay, but to make peace before it can fully move forward. Some stories don't need a new chapter to feel complete. Sometimes revisiting the old ones is enough to find the closure we never knew we needed. There's something profoundly mysterious about human connection, isn't there? It's never just about words or moments. It's energy, an unspoken language that our hearts understand long before our minds catch up. When two people share something real, that energy doesn't just disappear when they part ways. It lingers like the final notes of a beautiful song, still echoing in the quiet. And sometimes it's that very resonance that pulls a woman back. Not because she can't let go, but because something within her still feels tethered to that connection. As if the universe itself is gently nudging her to revisit what was left behind. We often underestimate how deeply we imprint on each other's souls. A glance, a conversation, a shared dream. These moments leave behind traces of ourselves, invisible but undeniable. And even when time and distance step in, that energy remains. Women return because there is something about that shared space, that emotional resonance that calls to them. It's almost as if the bond is incomplete, waiting for one final note to be played, one final truth to be acknowledged. But here's the beautiful irony. The return isn't always about the other person. Sometimes it's about understanding why that connection still matters, why it refuses to fade. It's about facing the unfinished symphony within themselves. Because love, in its truest form, isn't bound by time or circumstance. It's a force, an energy that seeks resolution, clarity, or simply one last dance before the music fades. So when a woman comes back, it's not a step backward. It's a brave, almost poetic act of honoring what was. It's a recognition that even the briefest connections can leave eternal imprints. And sometimes the heart needs to revisit those echoes, not to stay, but to finally let them go. Because the most powerful connections are never truly broken, they simply wait for the moment they are finally understood. There are moments in life when we leave parts of ourselves behind, not because we want to, but because we don't yet know who we are. Sometimes we step into relationships searching for something, though we may not always be aware of what that something is. In those spaces, we can lose pieces of our identity. And so a woman might leave, not because the love was lacking, but because she was searching for herself in someone else. In the silence of departure, she might have heard a voice calling her back to who she truly is. When a woman returns, it's not just about finding the other person. It's about finding herself. Those parts of her that were momentarily forgotten, buried under layers of expectations or unspoken fears. Returning isn't about retracing old steps. It's about reclaiming the person she was when she was first loved, the woman she glimpsed in another's eyes. In that return, she sees the reflection of herself she didn't know she was searching for, the pieces that had been momentarily lost but are now ready to be brought back together. There's something incredibly empowering in this process. It's not weakness or indecision. It's an act of self-reclamation. Relationships, especially the ones that shape us, leave behind echoes of what we could not yet understand. And when we return to them, it's as if we are finally ready to hear those echoes in full, to take what was once unknown and bring it into clarity. So when a woman comes back, it is not to fill a void left by someone else. It's to honor the truth within herself that has grown in her absence. It's a reflection of the journey she's been on, the growth she's experienced, and the strength she's gathered along the way. And in this return, she isn't coming back to the past. She's coming back to the woman she was always meant to be. There's a strange comfort in the familiar, isn't there? We often find ourselves drawn back to places, people, or experiences that remind us of who we once were, even if it's a version of ourselves we've outgrown. It's like when you walk into a room filled with memories, and without saying a word, the past speaks to you, reminding you of what was, what could have been, and sometimes what you need to hear. For many women, the return is not a desire to relive what's gone, but a need to reconnect with the emotional safety they once felt. It's a space that once made them feel seen and understood, a place where their vulnerability was met with compassion. The mind, in its quest for peace, often finds solace in the familiar, and sometimes returning to a relationship or a moment in time brings a kind of comfort that the unknown cannot provide. It's not about living in the past, it's about finding a safe space to breathe, to process, to make sense of the emotions that time may have dulled, but never fully erased. And in that space, even in the silence, clarity begins to rise. But it's important to recognize that this return isn't a retreat. It's a pilgrimage to self-understanding. When a woman revisits a person or a place, she is not merely revisiting memories. She is seeking a deeper understanding of herself in the context of where she has been and where she is headed. Nostalgia has a way of healing, of bringing us back to the emotional core of who we are, allowing us to see what we need to learn, what we've outgrown, and what still has meaning. So when she comes back, it is not weakness, it is courage. It's the courage to face her past, to embrace her growth, and to reconcile the parts of her that may have been scattered along the way. Because sometimes we must revisit the familiar in order to finally let go of what we thought we couldn't live without. Life as we know it doesn't always unfold in neat little boxes. We have this idea that things should happen in a certain order, that we should meet the right people at the right time, fall in love, learn lessons, and move forward. But the truth is, timing isn't something we control. It's something far greater than us. Sometimes the things that we want the most are simply not ready for us. And sometimes we are not ready for them. But that doesn't mean the connection wasn't real. It simply means that the universe has its own timing, its own rhythm, and it knows what is needed and when. When a woman comes back, it's often because the timing has finally aligned. Perhaps there was something unspoken that needed to be understood, Or maybe the lessons weren't quite learnt until now. Sometimes the person wasn't ready to be who they needed to be, or the space wasn't ready to hold the love that was waiting. But when everything falls into place, when the universe decides it's time, the return happens. It's as if a greater hand is guiding the moment, bringing two souls back together when the lessons are clear and the connection can finally thrive in the way it was meant to. This isn't just about two people reconnecting. It's about the cosmic synchronicity of two lives finding their place in a much bigger story. We think we control time, but in reality, time is a river. Sometimes we paddle against the current, and sometimes we let ourselves float until the water carries us where we need to be. So, when a woman comes back, she isn't returning to the past. She's returning to the moment when everything finally makes sense, when she is aligned with her highest self, and the universe offers its gentle approval. Because true connection isn't about forcing something into place. It's about waiting until the moment is right for it to unfold. Love is not linear, and life is certainly not a straight path. We often view relationships in terms of beginnings and endings, thinking that once something is over, it's done. But in reality, love is cyclical. It moves in circles, ebbing and flowing like the tides. A woman who leaves may not be leaving because she no longer cares. She may simply be stepping away to grow, to evolve, to understand herself in a way she couldn't when she was wrapped in the comfort of that relationship. But like the seasons, even after the leaves fall, the tree remains. And when the time is right, the leaves return, blooming once more, not as a repetition of the past, but as a reflection of new growth. This cycle, this rhythm of love, loss, and rediscovery is part of the natural order of things. Sometimes we must let go in order to find out what we really need. Sometimes we must walk away to give ourselves the space to understand the depth of what was shared. And in doing so, we return. Return not to the same place, but to a version of ourselves that is wiser, more resilient, and ready for what is ahead. The beauty of this cycle is that it teaches us that no experience, no matter how brief or painful, is ever truly wasted. Every connection leaves a mark on us, shapes us, teaches us something we didn't know we needed to learn. And even when we part ways, those lessons remain, sometimes waiting for us to return and apply them in a new chapter. When a woman returns, it's not a step backward. It's a return to the cycle of love and growth. A return to what was and what could be again, transformed and renewed. Because in love, the ending is never truly final. It's simply the prelude to a new beginning.